I am working very hard to be your next auditor, and I'm going to just take a few minutes to explain to you, or at least try to tell you why it matters who your next auditor is here in Ohio. Before I do that, I want to thank Gwen. Where's Gwen?
I'm over here now.
Hey, let's hear it for Gwen. Thank you for welcoming us to your beautiful home. And I want to thank some of our other sponsors, Keith Peters, who I had the pleasure of meeting today, the Pickaway County Democratic Party and the Young Dems, and your county auditor, Melissa Betts, who is at the hospital with her first grandchild?
Yep.
Wow. Today, so we'll give her a pass. I'm going to yell. If you can't hear me, just tell me to yell louder. I can do that. I want to begin my conversation with you today, and I'll welcome any questions you might have when I'm done. It won't be long. But I want to begin by just introducing my father, the great Socrates J. Space, who's sitting over there with the Zack Space t-shirt on. Zack Space is 88 years old. He'll be 88 in a few weeks. He is a Marine Corps veteran. He is a Korean War veteran, and obviously he's made me very proud through his service as a Democratic Party chairman over the years and my former law partner. So I'm delighted to be able to travel with my dad every day. And I want to start by just telling you a little story about his father. My father's name is Socrates, so you may have guessed that we are Greek American. Very proud of that. My grandparents came over here from Greece. My grandfather came over about a little over 100 years ago. He earned his citizenship as in the United States Army in World War I, was sworn in as an American citizen on an army base in France. After the war, went back to Greece, brought my grandmother, one child back. They had several more. My dad was born in 1930, the youngest of many children, a big immigrant family. I bring this up because my grandfather, who was a good man, in fact, my namesake, I'm named after him, was poor his entire life. He died poor, never owned his own car. Large family in a poor neighborhood, in a poor town, in a poor time during the Great Depression. And my grandfather was rich in a lot of immaterial ways. He was a good man, well loved by everyone who knew him. One day my father asked my grandfather, why did you do this, Pop? Why did you leave this beautiful island in the Aegean Sea to come here, Dover, Ohio, and live a life of poverty and hardship? What motivated you to leave your family? He never saw his parents again when he left. He was 17 years old. And the answer was simple. It was for you. It was for his family. It was for the democracy that has made this nation what it is, that we identify this nation. When we pledge to our allegiance to the flag, that democracy. My grandfather came here from a country that was under the Ottoman Empire. He left oppression to come here because everybody mattered, because every vote mattered. And I raise this story because I think we have an obligation as Ohioans and as Americans to at times question our democracy. Your democracy, our democracy, that democracy that has made us great, has been compromised and it has been perverted by the influences of money and political greed. I served 2 terms in Congress representing Ross County just to the south of here. Developed great friendships throughout this region during that time. But I can tell you, to get to Congress, to stay in Congress, you have to raise millions of dollars, and you do it by calling people you don't know, asking them to give you money. Money has become the central component of every campaign. Candidates are judged on how much money they raise above everything else. Money has turned what should be an objective process into a subjective one. Any legislator, whether they're sitting in Columbus or in Washington, D.C., who tells you that money doesn't impact policy is lying to you. Your democracy has been compromised by the forces of money. And it's been compromised by something else. Every 10 years, in a growing representational democracy, you have to reshuffle the deck to account for shifting populations and growing populations. This arcane redistricting provision, which is necessary, has been turned into the most powerful of political weapons. The way they've gerrymandered this state has not only disenfranchised millions of Ohioans because now you have politicians picking voters and not voters picking politicians, it has empowered extremism. Most members of Congress, most members of the General Assembly find themselves most politically vulnerable in their primaries because of the way these districts have been drawn up. And this causes them all to move to the extremes, the polls. And it has rendered moderation, compromise, and negotiation irrelevant. And this has created a dysfunctional government. These two things, money and gerrymandering, have not only perverted our democracy, they have given millions of Ohioans a legitimate reason not to believe in it anymore. I don't know if you like Donald Trump. I don't care if you like Donald Trump. I'm not here to talk about Donald Trump, but I am here to tell you about one thing. Donald Trump was right when he said the system is rigged. Donald Trump is president of the United States today because too many people have lost confidence and faith in our democratic process. And that loss of confidence and faith, regretfully, is justified. So, I'm running for auditor. The auditor is all about balancing the books, right? That's the role that we know of the auditor, making sure that your money is being properly spent. The books are being balanced, and I pledge to make sure that that happens as well as I possibly can. But the auditor can do something else about a different kind of balance. We have lost our balance in this state. We see it every day. We see it in divisions all around us. The auditor has a chance to change that. The auditor sits along with the governor and the Secretary of State on the redistricting commission. The auditor will help determine the political makeup of that commission. And as your next auditor, as proud as I am of my Democratic heritage, I will not be there representing the Democratic Party. I will be at that table on behalf of the people of the state of Ohio who have not had a seat at that table in a generation now. And I know, I just left Kathleen Clyde, who is a terrific candidate for Secretary of State. Rich and I crossed paths. We're good friends. We've known each other for a long time. I know those two, as candidates for governor and Secretary of State, fellow commission members, if they win, are also committed to ending gerrymandering once and for all in Ohio, and this state will be much, much better off because of it. I'm also committed as a watchdog of your taxpayer dollars to make sure that things like ECOT, for-profit charter school industry that has taken $1 billion, just one school, $1 billion away from public education and squandered it at the hands of unscrupulous profiteers who happen to be big. That is about the cutest little kid I've ever seen. I want to hold that.
It doesn't.
So anybody who wants a cat, I don't know where this came from. Seriously.
I'll take it. So ECOT has taken $1 billion away from public schools and has produced graduation rates of less than 30%. Average daily attendance rates of less than 30%. And they got away with it because of the amount of money they were giving to politicians. Payday lenders have been exploiting the poor for a decade. Only now have they changed the law when they know they're being watched after the Speaker of the House is about to get indicted. Our criminal justice system is up for sale with private prisons. Pharmacy benefit managers are now raking enormous profits. Nothing is sacred in this state when it comes to pay to play. Not the future of our children, not the interests of the poor, not our criminal justice system, not our health care. Nothing is beyond the reach. And our auditor has something to say about it. I sure as hell intend to do something about it. Excuse me for my language. I didn't mean to let that slip out. So I'm here today to ask you to join us as we recapture the most basic and fundamental principles of democracy. It does not have to be this way. We do not have to accept this perversion of our democracy. Here's how you can help. If you can afford to write a check, I need your help. I'm not shaking down big corporations. I'm counting on a lot of small dollar contributions to communicate my message. If you cannot afford to write a check, I understand that. There are a lot of Ohioans that can't right now. There are other things you can do. You can access our social media platforms through my webpage, zackspaceForOhio.com, and you can volunteer. You can put a yard sign in your yard. In fact, we have yard signs here you can take with you today. You can sign up to go door to door with us, get on the phones with us, spread our message to your friends, do a house party like this, whatever it takes. We all should be doing our part. And each of us knows what our part is. So I'm asking you, whether it's for me or Rich Cordray or Kathleen Clyde, that you consider stepping up your activism and making a difference this year. And I'm going to close on this and I'll open it up for questions. As a lifelong Democrat, I have always aspired to the concept of social justice. I think that's the defining characteristic of the Democratic Party. And I know some of you may not be Democrats, and I do not mean to offend you if you are not. My message appeals to independents and Republicans alike. But as a Democrat, I aspire to social justice. And what that means is justice in accessing opportunity, a quality public education, affordable health care, justice in the context of environmental justice, racial justice, gender justice, these things that our party stands for. But I'm here to tell you today that none of it happens. None of it happens without some semblance of political justice. We have to rein in corporate wealth and political ambition. When we achieve political justice, we will achieve social justice. So I'm Zack Space, and I'm going to be your next auditor. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Do we have any inquisitive souls? And if not, I will be around for a little while to address any questions you might want to ask privately. Okay, it's going.
I have a question. I do. I have a question. So it's about how those of us here and folks like us, the grassroots effort in this part of the state that hasn't worked recently. Mm-hmm. What's your plan for that? What can you and your folks guide us into so that trio you talked about gets as much attention as we can possibly give it?
Yeah. So here's what's happened politically in the last several election cycles, and then I'll tell you what I think has to change. The powers that be that make decisions about where resources get spent have decided to, in large part, abandon rural parts of our state. I am a former member of Congress that represented 16 rural counties, 14 of which were in Appalachia. All of these counties were left behind by a governmental process that caters more to wealth and to political ambition than it does to their needs. This, I think, explains in large part why the people of rural Ohio voted so decisively for Donald Trump. They didn't vote for him because he was a Republican. They voted for him because he was anti-establishment. He was not a part of the institution of politics. I think that we as a party, meaning people like me and Kathleen and Rich, we need to spend more time in counties like this. I have very purposefully spent a lot of time in southeastern Ohio over the last year as I've campaigned. I'm finding that they want just showing up. Just showing up is half the battle. Listening to their concerns, because they feel rightfully they've been forgotten. From the ODP's perspective and statewide candidates' perspective, we need to spend more time on the ground in counties like this. From your perspective, look, this upcoming election is going to be all about turnout. They all are. And we need to energize people to get involved. And there's no better way to do that than approaching your friends, your family, your neighbors, your colleagues. Sherrod Brown puts it this way, and by the way, Sherrod Brown's the best U.S. Senator this state has ever had. We cannot afford to lose him this fall. But Sherrod Brown says it this way, if you show up at an event like this, you are very likely to be the most sophisticated person in your family when it comes to political sense. Because most people don't bother showing up at events like this. If every one of you takes it as your personal responsibility to find 5 people you know who are not likely to vote, whether they're not registered or even if they're registered, not likely to vote, make it your responsibility. Write their names down. Make it your responsibility to ensure that they get to the polls on November 6th. It starts with your the people around you in your immediate circle. If enough people do that, then we win, and we win.
Thanks.
Sometimes when a crack appears in the dam boat bursts open, so sometimes when one question is asked, they all start flying. But if that's the case, okay, I'll be here.
Hey, Zach.
Oh, yes, Zach.
What is your stance on lobbyists? How do you feel about lobbyists?
I don't think lobbyists are the problem. I think the money in politics is the problem. There are some really good, reputable organizations that have lobbyists, nonprofits, and they can be seen as educators. The problem comes in when you have money. Money, influence. These politicians rely on money to win elections. And in Ohio, here's one place we can start. In Ohio, we have campaign finance limits that are some of the highest in the nation. If you want to give to Sherrod Brown, who's running for U.S. Senate, I think the most you can give is $2,700 per cycle. If you want to give to your state rep or to a candidate running for state office, it's $12,700 per cycle. It's like 5 times higher than the federal limits. It's some of the highest in the nation. So you can give in the primary, you can give $12,000 in the general, your wife can give $12,000 in the primary, $12,000 in the general, your 7-year-old twins can give $12,000 in the primary and $12,000 in the general, and that happens.